Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster.
Don't you understand, George? It's because you were not born.
Film church.
Well, a boy's best friend is his mother.
30 years of pounding beats and riding cars. 30 years of dirt and crummy pay. For 30 years, I gave my life to this department. And you allow this foreigner to accuse me? Answer. Why do I have to answer him? No, sir. I won't take back that badge until the people of this county want me back.
Hello, and welcome to Film Church Radio. This is the podcast that treats cinema as a religion. It's Sunday. I'm Lewis.
And I'm Branden.
And we are here to talk about movies. Each week, Branden and I alternate picking a film for us both to watch and discuss. This week, we are continuing our deep dive into the shadowy world of film noir. And I picked the 1958 film Touch of Evil, written, directed, and starring Orson Welles. The film also stars Charlton Heston, Janet Leigh, Zsa Zsa Gabor, and Marlene Dietrich. This is a film that I have had on my watch list and my shelf for many, many years. For some reason, I've just never got round to putting it in the DVD player and watching it. So this was the perfect opportunity for me to get it down and to watch it. I think that Orson Welles is definitely someone who intrigues me, and I don't think I've been that well acquainted with him in the past. So any opportunity to sit down and kind of and see the genius at work is much needed. So I'm glad that we had this chance to watch it together. This was Branden and I's first watch, as we'll get into it a little bit when we get into the main film. I think we've both had crossings with it in the past, where maybe we've seen a little bit but not watched the whole thing. So I'm excited to know what Branden thought about it and to get into it in its entirety. Before we do, though, we would like to say thank you to everyone who's been listening to the podcast and sending their love for the show. We recently hit 50 episodes, which is an incredible milestone. And next week will be a full year since we've been putting out episodes continuously, which is great. I mean, we are both thrilled that we're keeping it up and getting, people listening to it is wonderful. So thank you to everyone who's listening. Go ahead and subscribe and make sure that, you get notified when new episodes drop. Hint, it's on a Sunday. And also leave us a rating and review wherever you listen. It really helps spread the word. Even if it's just a star rating, you don't need to write anything if you don't feel inclined. Just a star rating would be wonderful, just so other people can see it. Join the congregation. That's what we'd love to see. We also are all on all social media platforms at Film Church Radio, where you can see what we're posting. Recently, I put out a top 10 on Twitter of some film noirs that are noteworthy and should really be watched this November. So go ahead and check that out and let us know what you think and if there's any that I missed, which I'm sure there will be quite a few. We also post some extra content on our YouTube channel, so you can go ahead and watch that. There's some videos that we've done on the Obi-Wan Kenobi series and with any of the live episodes that we did with our filmmaker friends. We like to record those and put them up on YouTube so you can see our faces while we talk about movies as well. So go ahead and check that out. Now we've got that part out of the way, Branden and I like to talk about what else we've been watching this week. It's kind of like the trailers before the main feature. So Branden, talk to us. What have you been watching this week?
Well, I have rewatched Inglourious Bastards from 2009. 5 out of 5 movie for me. Such fond memories of watching that in the theater. It came out a year into my first job of working at a movie theater, and it was the first film that we ever got on 35 millimeter print. And by 2009, in our little town of Nacogdoches, Texas, all of the film projectionists had already been gone for like 3 years because the theater I worked for, which was Carmike Cinemas, completely went digital in like 2006, they were like one of the first to do it. All digital projectors, which pushed out a lot of the film projectionists that worked for them. And then, by 3 years later, nobody knew how to thread a 35 millimeter print. So we had this kid from the town over show us like one time, and those first few showings of Inglourious Bastards were rough, to say the least. Yeah. But I still have very fond memories of like getting to like figure that out for the first time. Yeah. By the end of the run, I was an expert. Yeah. Maybe not completely, but I could thread it through properly without the voices sounding like demons. I decided to rewatch it because I got to go see Quentin Tarantino live in person last Saturday, and because he's got his book out, Cinema Speculation. So I decided to go speculate him in person. And he was in Austin, so that's only a couple hours from me. Yeah. So I was able to just like go for the evening and drive back after the show, and it was kind of surreal, seeing him in person. We had to put our phones in pouches that were like locked up, so we couldn't, have them out or take pictures or anything, or record or anything like that. And the weirdest part about that was just not knowing what time it was, because I think we got there like when the doors opened, which was at 7, and he came on at 8. But just for that whole hour, it was just like, what time is it? Yeah. But then when he finally came out, it was just like, wow, like there he is. This is weird. Yeah. I mean, it's like, I imagine it's the same for anybody who like goes to see a band that they love, Yeah. Did they finally get to see in person, for the first time? It was just, I mean, just as a filmmaker, it's like, I think I've also reached this point in my life where, I'm a little more grounded, I think, than I was in my 20s. Yeah. And realizing that people, celebrities are just people, and like seeing them in person kind of helps you realize that they're not just like some weird like storybook character that you just imagine, is your friend or something. Yeah. It was a really cool experience. Basically, he just answered a bunch of questions about his process of writing this book. And his childhood, because the book is basically about all the movies he saw as a kid, his first, basically, I think, from like 6 to 18 years old or something like that. I've only read the first chapter, and then there was an intermission, and then the last half of the show, he read the last chapter of the book and kind of like walked around the stage and very animated. Yeah. In an animated kind of like almost doing, his own version of stand up reading from the book, which was cool. It was a lot of fun.
That's awesome.
Sorry.
Was there any revelations from it? Was there anything that he said that kind of that struck home for you?
Not particularly.
Yeah.
I mean, I think just learning more about his life and childhood, just kind of it makes more sense now. Kind of the films that he made and has been interested in and stuff. There was the last chapter of the book that he reads out loud. He's talking about this kind of adult friend that he had, that he would hang out with a lot. And found out that this guy had an ambition to be a screenwriter, and he like wrote a couple of screenplays, and his screenplays were like the first screenplays that he wrote, and he read those when he was like 16 or so, I think. And but I think it's just interesting, it's interesting like knowing how long it actually took him to get going, because he was 16 when he read that, and then didn't write his own screenplay for several years after that. But even before he had like written a feature-length screenplay, he like tried to make this movie, My Best Friend's Birthday, which I've been listening to a recent podcast that our friend Zach sent us. I'm trying to think of the guy's name, but it's the guy that wrote The Rounders. Yeah. He does an interview with Tarantino, and he kind of talks about this period in his life where he spent 3 years trying to make this movie on 16 millimeter film, and he would save up money for 3 months and then shoot some stuff, and then basically put it on the table for the next 3 months till he could save enough money to shoot again. Yeah. So he shoots this movie for 3 years, and by the end of it, he takes a look at the footage he has, and it's terrible. He hates it. Like, nothing's good about it. And he said he gave himself 2 weeks to feel sorry for himself. And then at the end of the 2 weeks, he took a look at it again and was like, yeah, it kind of sucks, but this stuff that's that I shot within the last year isn't terrible. So I guess I could kind of look at this as like a film school. It's like taught me how to be a better filmmaker and make a movie. He's like, I'm going to try to write a really good screenplay and get more money. And then like get real money to make a movie. And so then he wrote True Romance, and he spent the next 5 years trying to get that made, which is just crazy. Like, you think about the time that he started making this film, 3 years plus another 5 years. It's just, kind of encouraging to see somebody just like not give up. Yeah. Like, no, I've got, this is what I'm supposed to do. I've got something good. It's really hard to believe in yourself when you're like the only one that believes in yourself. Like, he even talks about this one point in his childhood when he was writing like short scripts and stuff when he was in high school, and his mom was like, this little script writing thing that you're doing, like, that's over. And like he was just in his head, he was like, okay, you're never gonna see a dime like from my success. And apparently to this day he's like never bought his mom a house or anything like that, which is just so, like, that's a little extreme. Yeah. I mean, even the guy that was interviewing him was just like, I think you can buy your mom a house now.
Yeah.
But it's like just that drive, I think is inspiring. It's like, but also just, like, the process of becoming a filmmaker is a process of like finding your own voice. Yeah. And it was cool, like, seeing Tarantino in person, and, for one, because he's, I've been a fan of his for so long, but also just to be like, I'm not gonna be Tarantino, and I don't want to be. I want to express myself. Find my own voice. And I think that was kind of the main thing I took out of it was, what weirdly enough was being like, I don't want to be this guy.
No, that's cool though. I mean,
yeah. Obviously, I still like think he's incredible as a filmmaker, but just realizing like, Tarantino's Tarantino. I'm not Tarantino.
Yeah.
So I can't wait to finish the book. It's really good so far. The nice thing about it is like, so far is it like he talks about so many movies, but he kind of tells you like, also, these don't hold up and they're not worth watching. So I don't feel bad about like not actually watching the movies, and I can just enjoy the book and kind of, see his thought process and like his journey of becoming a filmmaker, because I mean, we talked about last week, we talked about Robert Rodriguez a lot and how much I love El Mariachi and his book Rebel Without a Crew, and so far I think this is kind of like his Rebel Without a Crew almost.
Yeah.
You know, because it's kind of about him without it really being about him, if that makes sense.
No,
you know,
it does.
It's like his own story. So, yeah, it's cool.
Yeah. So my Christmas wish list this year.
Yes.
His book. I'm excited to read it.
Yeah, man. I can't wait for you to read it, us to talk about it.
Yeah.
But after I watched *Inglourious Bastards*, I've also been thinking about World War II a lot lately and how much I don't know about it. And, you know, I never had like a formal education, like history education.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of going back now and trying to understand how my country is in the place it is today.
Yeah.
And so, and film is also a good way to kind of learn things sometimes, because, you know, artists are expressing their take on an issue, and then you can go back and like read what actually happened and kind of like put things together. Obviously, *Inglourious Bastards* is not a factual film.
Yeah.
And so I decided to go back and watch *The Great Dictator*, the Charlie Chaplin film from 1940, that was made like right after the start of World War II, but before like the Holocaust had happened and stuff. You know, because I've heard a lot about the film. You know, I kind of knew that it was a very, you know, politically charged film, and like, you know, it wasn't received well for a long time.
Yeah.
And man, it was just so good. It was just like, it was crazy because I started watching it and would get like 10 or 15 minutes into it, and then I'd like start watching some YouTube videos on it, like quick history of like World War II, just basically like this happened and this happened, you know, and started trying to kind of put together, okay, this was 1940, what was actually going on, you know, what happened the years after. And it was a great way to kind of learn some more history, but also just like, oh my God, like The Great Dictator is so good. Like, and it's crazy that it's crazy that he, you know, was that bold, but also somehow like made it just his normal, like, you know, his Charlie Chaplin way, like goofiness and funny and, you know, somewhat slapsticky, I guess. And like, but then to just like be so deep at the same time and expressive and trying to create something that would get people to understand what was really going on.
Yeah.
And that we, you know, just need to like be good people and help each other out. And like, I think it's one that I'm gonna have to watch a few more times for sure. Yeah. So that was that.
Yeah. I mean, there's not much to say that hasn't already been said by yourself about The Great Dictator. It's just phenomenal. You know, it's so in tune and aware of what's going on before America were like, you know, because the whole reason that you were saying that people didn't, or that it wasn't, you know, well received at the time, was because America was like, hey, don't annoy anyone. Like, it's not for us to get involved. And Chaplin was like, how can you not?
Yeah.
You know, this guy is literally going to try and take over the world.
Yeah.
If you are interested in like World War II and kind of how especially the German film industry reacts to the rise of Nazism, there's a really great podcast called The Haunted Screen. I think there's only 6 episodes at the moment. There's only 6 episodes, and that's like the end of the first season. But it starts pretty much at the end of the First World War, and it focuses on either a film or a filmmaker each episode, and kind of like charts the rise to like the beginning of World War II.
Interesting.
And I just absolutely devoured it. It's amazing. So if anyone's interested in knowing how cinema reacted to certain political and world events from lead up to World War II, listen to The Haunted Screen.
Yeah, and I was talking to Sarah about this film too, because I was like, saying that it wasn't well received when it first came out, and I was like, America was not on board with demonizing Hitler yet. Like, he was on the cover of Time magazine in 1938, 2 years before this, as Person of the Year.
Yeah.
Which is just like, what?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Anyway, history is crazy.
Yeah. Learn from it.
Yeah.
What other historically significant film have you been watching this week, Brandon?
None. I did put Schindler's List on my watch list, which I've never seen. I know, crazy, but I did put that on my list like right after, so I'm gonna watch that soon. But I did go to film church. I went to the cinema and saw a movie, and I gave it 3 stars. No, I mean, it wasn't terrible. I went and saw Black Adam. It's like, if this movie had come out 20 years ago, it would have been amazing. But it's just like, it's just another superhero movie. It's like, the action was really good. I had a good time watching it. It did all the things superhero movies do, but it's like, it's just a superhero. Like, it didn't, it was fine. It wasn't as bad as I expected, and it didn't, it entertained me, and, didn't.
Yeah.
I don't know. It was fine.
Did its thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what have you been watching?
So a few things. So I want to preface, so I watched Blonde, the Netflix film that kind of got a bit of a theatrical release and got a lot of talk. Me and you had been talking about it recently. I think it came up that we haven't been watching a lot of like the Netflix original stuff, so it came to like, one night, and we had a few hours, and I was like, okay, let's watch Blonde. And I do want to preface that I used to be a really big fan of Marilyn Monroe. I watched a lot of her films and kind of really found her story really interesting. Which I've come away from in recent years. I do dip back in every now and again, like Some Like It Hot and stuff like that. But I wouldn't say I'm like, a huge fan. I wouldn't, necessarily seek her films out above anything else. But I am a fan, and I do know her story pretty well. And I have read a lot of reviews and listened to a lot of stuff that was saying, it's a fictional kind of take on her life. Totally understood that. There's a lot of stuff in there. You haven't got to look at it as a Marilyn Monroe biography. You got to biopic. Sorry, you got to look at it as a story about trauma. And I was like, cool. Like, went in with it. Like, all those expectations. I wasn't expecting anything, and I absolutely hated it. It's like 3 hours long, and it is honestly just a woman getting physically and mentally abused for 3 hours.
Yeah. And
at the end of it, I was like, I just can't watch this anymore.
Yeah.
I was so thankful when the credits rolled, because it is nearly 3 hours. And it is just relentless. It's just totally unneeded. There's not even one bit in there that's that adds any, I don't know, light to this film.
Yeah.
And there's, and it's not historically accurate. That's fine. You can have artistic, license and kind of do whatever you want. But I just felt that to know Marilyn, and to kind of understand who she was as a person, this film is just doing exactly what every single other person did and just used to sell it. It's just like, it's Marilyn, and people, so people will go and see it, and it's dreadful. I hated it.
Yeah.
And then after it, I read a couple of reviews again, because I was like, I want to see if there was anything I missed, like if there was something in there that like really I should have been paying attention to that I just wasn't for whatever reason. And the director said something along the lines of, in a Science Sound interview, does anybody even watch Marilyn Monroe films anymore? And I was like, okay, I'm done with this completely. I'm like
he was saying that like people don't understand it because they don't watch Marilyn Monroe films anymore, or
no, just like nobody watches Marilyn Monroe films. So why would I try and kind of portray that Marilyn? Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, okay, I don't think that's true. Because if that's just kind of disregarding a whole, anything before like the last 20 years is not relevant anymore.
Yeah, so what you're saying is just that this is like just a completely fictional, like this is a film for people who have never seen a Marilyn Monroe film, maybe, or I don't know if it's even a film for anybody, but
I guess, my sister tried to watch it as well, and she's not, I don't think she's seen a Marilyn Monroe film, and I think she only sat through like 40 minutes, and she was like, I can't watch anymore.
Yeah.
And I know that people did find things in there that are good and like enjoyed it and stuff, but to me, it's just mean and gross, and I didn't like it at all.
Yeah. Our friend Jason Woods liked it.
Yeah. I didn't know that.
You can go read his review on Letterboxd. You can go find him.
I will.
I mean, it
sounded ominous, but yeah, I was gonna kind of, yeah.
He didn't say much, but he gave it 4 out of 5. Said
Yeah.
that Ana de Armas needs all the awards.
Yeah.
And then, yeah.
Yeah.
I might still watch it. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I
that's
mean, there's
fine.
so much stuff I need
that,
to
like,
watch still.
I know. And I know that, like, as a viewer and as a fan, I brought a lot of baggage with me that I really tried to leave behind.
Yeah.
And at the end, I was like, why am I trying to leave it behind? Like, film is so personal. Why am I trying to, like, look at it from an unobjective point of view?
Yeah.
I am objective.
Yeah.
And I didn't like it. So, yeah, I'm cool with that. I'm going to add it to the films that I'm never going to watch again. I gave it 1.5 stars. So
nice.
Never going to watch it again. And
it wasn't half a star.
That's right. Yeah, it bumped up. I mean, Ana de Armas is really good, and there's some interesting shots in it. But on the whole, 2 thumbs down.
Yeah.
And then with it being Noirvember, I've been ticking off some more film noirs. So I watched Johnny O'Clock. Silly name, great movie is what I'm going to call it from now on. Just your regular kind of film noir with Dick Powell and Lee J. Cobb, who is just a powerhouse. When Lee J. Cobb shows up, normally he's not on the poster or he's not the main person in a film. But whenever he shows up, I'm like, I'm happy. This is going to be a good movie. So yeah, it's just. A woman ends up being found dead, and it's kind of like, who did it? Cop story with a guy in the middle who's also trying to work it out. Typical noir fare, but yeah, one I hadn't seen before, and I really enjoyed it. So don't go watch Blonde, go watch Johnny O'Clock. Then, because we watched Touch of Evil, I went back and watched The Third Man, which I hadn't seen since I was at university. So I must have been, 12 years ago? Probably. And I can't remember liking it very much when I first saw it. I think I didn't get it when I first saw it. And it's one of those films that, like, I keep seeing people like, Third Man's great. I'm like, I don't like that film. So I went back and watched it again. And yeah, I mean, I was wrong. It was good.
Yeah.
I had a good time with it. I understood it a lot more. The camera work is just incredible. The setting's really great. The use of shadow is beautiful. Yeah, I really had a good time with it. So,
sweet.
Yeah.
Never seen it.
Third Man. It is streaming on. There's a BFI player that you can download from like Apple TV.
Okay.
And I got like a 2-week free trial with it, and it's on there. So
nice.
It's like lots of British films. So
yeah,
it's free if anyone wants to do that and give it a try.
Sweet.
But that was kind of preparing me for our feature presentation. Yes. We are watching, or we have watched, and we are discussing Touch of Evil from 1958. The Letterboxd summary and synopsis is the strangest vengeance ever planned. When a car bomb explodes on the American side of the US-Mexico border, Mexican drug enforcement agent Miguel Vargas begins his investigation, along with American police captain Hank Quinlan, When Vargas begins to suspect that Quinlan and his shady partner Menzies are planting evidence to frame an innocent man, his investigations into their possible corruption quickly put himself and his new bride, Susie, in jeopardy. Bum, bum, bum. So this is the film that we're watching, Touch of Evil. And like I said, it's a film that Brandon and I both have not watched before, but we have come close. Isn't that right, Brandon?
Yeah, I mean, it's a film that you hear about all the time. You know, once you're like, I'm into film or I'm a filmmaker, you know, you'll hear this. I mean, obviously, Orson Welles, you'll just hear about all the time, especially Citizen Kane. They're like, most every film critic out there is like, it's the greatest film ever. You know, so Orson Welles is obviously just a very highly talked about filmmaker.
Yeah.
And Touch of Evil is just, you know, pops into conversations and stuff. But you know, other than knowing the name and the director, I'd never really knew much about it. You know, it's one of those films. It's like, as a filmmaker, I'm like, yeah, I probably should watch that at some point. But you know, there's a million things like that. Yeah,
of course. So, what was your initial thoughts when you watched the film?
Well, first of all, I love this film. This was an amazing film. But before we like really dive into it, I got to talk about the brown face.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, very there.
It is
but
a shame.
I did have a question because it's you know, like Charlton Heston, he's a really good actor. You know, he's really good in this movie. He doesn't do a Mexican accent, but he's playing a Mexican character. But at the time, you know, this is 1958. Was there a law against like a person of color being in a relationship with a white woman on screen and like kissing and that kind of stuff?
So I don't think there was a law. It just wasn't the norm. And I think that people kind of would have reacted to it in the wrong way. Because the original source material that it comes from, the Susie character was supposed to be Mexican. And Vargas, I guess his name wasn't Vargas, but he was supposed to be from the American side.
Oh, interesting.
But Orson changed it. And I think that probably would have, I mean, that would have worked. But knowing, you know, not knowing, but from what I know about Orson Welles, he probably did this to evoke feelings from the audience. Because I think if you had seen, I mean, Hedy Lamarr was huge, you know, in the 40s and stuff, and she wasn't Mexican, but she was, you know, there was a lot of foreign female stars that kind of grew to prominence. So seeing a Charlton Heston type with a Mexican lady wouldn't have been taboo. It would have just been like, okay, cool. He's like, you know, he's wooed her. Yeah. But this is something that you don't see very often.
Yeah.
And I was trying to think, so I was like, okay, so if Charlton Heston wasn't there, who would have played Charlton Heston's character? And I can't think of many, if any.
Cesar Romero,
yeah, he would. I mean, he has got the mustache, and I know that Cesar Romero loves his mustache. But yeah, it would have been hard to have cast because Hollywood was so closed to that, to anyone breaking through that wasn't white. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at one point, it was. I mean, I could just be wrong. Like I said earlier, I never had formal history lessons, but at one point there was like laws against, you know, like mixed relationships in films, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure the Hays Code probably had some kind of caveat in there that was like, can't show, you know, interracial relationships.
Yeah.
Because any marital, you know, they couldn't kiss for, I think it was like longer than 4 seconds because it was considered obscene. So, and they had to, had to show couples in separate beds if they were married. So things like that. I am pretty sure that there would have been, no interracial relationships here on the screen. Heck, it was still 2 years until we saw a flushing toilet. So,
Yeah.
we've got a long way to go from this point for things to be normalized. So,
Yeah. Okay, well, we don't have to talk about that anymore. I just wanted to bring it up right off the bat.
the last thing I want to say about it is that Charlton Heston did say that the fact that he didn't do a Mexican accent was his biggest regret.
Well, it's not my biggest regret, that's for sure.
No, I'm very thankful that he didn't. And I think that when he speaks Spanish, I don't know if it's even him, but it seems that's the only part that seemed believable to me.
It didn't sound good to me.
Okay, but that's fine. I've never been around. We didn't teach it in school and stuff like that. So
yeah.
But
To me, it was very Charlton Heston memorizing lines.
Okay, cool.
But he pronounced things like correctly. But he did there was no accent at all, even when he was pronouncing, speaking in Spanish. But but I think it's better that way. It at least makes it like, okay, he's supposed to be Mexican, suspension of disbelief.
Yeah.
Whereas if he had done an accent, it would have just felt even more icky.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Kind of like Steiger and Duck You Sucker. That was just...
Yeah, I think that once you've seen that, anything that isn't, I don't know, incredibly insensitive in terms of accents, it kind of slips by a little bit now. Bit easier, I should say.
Yeah. Goes down easier. Yeah. Yeah. But, besides that, this film is incredible. It starts off and it has this incredible opening shot, that is, known as one of the greatest opening shots in cinema history. Yeah. It just goes on for so long and they must have had just this ginormous crane. That starts out, the shot starts close up on this guy's hands holding this bomb, and then it, pulls out, and then it goes above the buildings and then back down in the streets, and it picks up on different characters and follows people around. It's a crazy opening shot that's just like kind of ahead of its time, it seems like, for this year, 1958. Yeah. A lot of the filmmaking of this movie does feel way ahead of its time. Yeah. It feels it's like 15 years before everybody else.
Yeah, I do want to get onto that because I know that there's a lot in there. But yeah, with the crane shot to open the film, it started off as them kind of mapping it out where they wanted to go, and then they had to build a crane that would allow them to do the shot in one take, because it's 3.5 minutes is the time that the bomb is set for. Is the time that it kind of takes for us to get to that point. Yeah. And Charlton Heston said that everything was going fine, and then they would get to the border agent, and the border agent would completely forget his lines every single time because so much rested on him. And in the end, Orson Welles was like, "I don't care if you mouth it." He was like, don't break character. Don't turn around and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Wells, I forgot my lines." He's like, "Just mouth it. We can add it post." So when we go back and watch it, you can see that the sun's coming up a little bit in the distance because it took them all night to get this shot, which I find really funny. And then when you do watch it again, you can tell his lines are dubbed. Yeah, he never turns around. It's just and it's kind of louder than the natural sounds around him, which I find really funny. But yeah, it's an incredible shot to open a film with.
Yeah. Yeah, it's awesome. And then I will say that the first 20 to 30 minutes of this movie kind of were a bit slow going for me. The first time watching it, I was like, it was so dense all at once. Yeah. It was so much information. I'm trying to like keep track of characters' names and what the actual plot is. Like, obviously we're trying to figure out who set this bomb off, but like, who is this other guy? Because like, you've got to be paying close attention or you're gonna miss things, you know, because they mention in the beginning that Vargas is like a detective, a Mexican detective on, you know, the Mexican side of the border, and he's incarcerated. This Grande brother, and then you get introduced to this other, you know, the brother of the guy that he's incarcerated, but he's never met him, and you know, the like all this. There's just a lot going on, like a lot happening all at once. So it made a lot more. Like, I went back and watched it again, and those first 30 minutes, after you know what's happened, it's like it just all makes sense, you know, and it goes down a lot easier. But yeah, I missed a lot the first time watching this film, but then, you know, after those first, I think it also because the first 30 minutes is like the same night. It's like the night the bomb goes off. You're getting all this information, and getting introduced to these characters and trying to figure out what's going on. And then by the time that the couple, Charlton Heston and Janet Leigh, get in the car and they're like driving off and it's the next day, I was like, oh, finally.
Yeah.
Like, we're somewhere else. Like, something else is going on. Like, finally. Like, of course, that was just the first time I watched it. Like, watching it again, I didn't necessarily feel like that. But, you know, and then I would like the last. I enjoyed the character stuff a lot more the second time I watched it, like the beginning and the middle. But the last 45 minutes of this movie are just like, it just ramps up. And is super, like on the edge of your seat, like entertaining. I had a great time watching this movie.
Good. I think the comparison I'm going to make, which I don't take lightly, is that I think for me, it's going to be a new Vertigo. Not in terms of like the stature of it, because Vertigo is my favorite film ever made, but the fact that the first time I watched it, I was like, that was fine. There's a lot in there I missed. So the second time I watched it, because I pretty much stopped the film stopped, and I was like, I feel like I need to go and watch it again. I feel like I've missed it, you know. So I pretty much I've watched it twice in like 24 hours. And the second time I came away and I was like, whoa. Like, I just want to go back and watch more. Like, I want to spend more time with Quinlan. Like, I just want to kind of be with these characters again. Because again, like, it's added to it, but next time I watch it, there's going to be more. There's going to be more and more and more and more to it that I'm going to have to keep peeling away. And that's how I feel with Vertigo. Every time I watch it, there's something new in there that I haven't noticed. And I think it's going to be the same for this.
Yeah, I can't imagine it will be. Should we start talking about Quinlan?
Yeah,
because
we could do a whole hour on Quinlan.
I mean, yeah, like there was so much. Like, the first time you watch it, you're just like, man, this guy is disgusting. Like, he's so. I mean, it like Orson Welles just disappears into this guy, and he's just like, you know, some of the time, the first time you're watching, you're like, what the hell is he saying? You know, because he's just like, you know, what are you doing, Vargas? You know, it's just, you know, he's just he is this character. And I still like enjoyed watching him. And I loved the ending of this movie because it's kind of what you expect, but not exactly. You know, it's like when they're walking on the bridge, and he's like trying to record him and trying to get him to confess. You know, it was like in my head I was like, well, he's just gonna say it. Like, they're just gonna get it on tape, right? Like, that's how it'll end. But then it doesn't really, like, that's just what I expected. But then I don't know. It just plays out so well. I mean, just all those moments of him, like, washing the blood off his hands in the water and stuff. Like,
It's so Shakespearean. That ending is just
Yeah.
like the last scene in a Shakespeare play.
Yeah, it
know?
really is. Yeah. But then like going back and watching it the second time, I didn't even notice the first time that he was like this alcoholic, and
Yeah.
then there's this whole thing, this backstory on his wife who was strangled. I just have so many questions. I'm like still trying to figure this character out. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, so was he a good cop at one point? Like, or has he always been this bad cop?
I mean,
Or
you've
like-
got to assume, haven't you? I mean, so the second time I watched it with the commentary because, like I said, there was so much in there. I was like, okay, I want to listen to a commentary and like have someone that has seen this a million times dissect it for me bit by bit.
Yeah.
And they were talking about the fact that, I mean, before we get to that, sorry, the bit I want to point out first is that when he dies, so Quinlan dies at the end, and we as the audience think that he's kind of fingered the wrong person. He's set this guy up, planted evidence to frame him basically just to get the win.
Yeah.
And then as soon as he dies, one of the characters is like, oh, and the guy that he had, that he chose confessed. He did it. And you're like, whoa. Like, so my judgment of this character has been completely wrong. Because he's not doing this for just to close the case. His instincts are bang on. Like, he knows the whole way through. Like, he knows that this guy did it, and he'll just stop at nothing to make him pay.
Yeah.
So when we get that backstory about his wife and the fact that he couldn't, like, get the guy, I think they say, like, he let him slip. That is just, like, incredible writing. Because you know that he's got the intuition. He knows without really knowing. I don't know. It's weird. He's a great cop, but he's not a reliable
Well, he's a
one.
detective.
Yeah.
He's a good. I think they even say that at one point. He's a great detective, and he's not a great cop, or something like that. Or maybe they say that about Vargas. I don't remember.
Yeah.
I know there's a line like that in there. Or maybe it's the other way around.
Yeah.
But but see, see, it's like that makes some sense. Like I could see the case for that. But also, what kind of guy who's been traumatized by his wife being strangled to death then goes and strangles someone?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, would that not be like, would that not trigger that trauma? Which makes me wonder if he strangled his wife.
Well, yeah, that's an extra layer. Yeah.
It's like maybe he's like a really dirty cop, and he couldn't stand his wife. He killed her when he was in his 20s, and now he's like just been this dirty cop his whole career.
Yeah. I mean yeah. I mean that scene where he does strangle I forget the character's name.
Joe Grande.
Joe Grande, that's it. Uncle Joe. That is, I mean, the whole Janet Leigh's whole arc in this is like horror adjacent. It's so scary to me. And that scene especially is like where it tips over. He just murders him in this room, and then she wakes up with him like with his bulging eyes, kind of watching her over the bed because that's where he fell. It's honestly so creepy. But I think that the strangle, like where he strangles him, that's the end. There's no coming back from that.
Yeah,
that's how I read it. Like he's gonna, he's crossed that line into. Before he was always trying to catch the bad guy and like would go to any means to do it, and now he's crossed the line to that other side.
Yeah.
So it's only.
But he's also picked alcohol back up because he was he was like sober.
Yeah.
They mentioned that, and then this guy like tricked him into drinking again, which I did not catch the first time.
Yeah, and he goes back to Tanner's. Is it Tanner or Tanya? Goes back to her whorehouse, and he's there when they kind of come calling Sam.
Yeah.
He's kind of just gone back full into debauchery.
Yeah.
I mean, there's more to it. So the reason that he walks with a limp and that he's got the cane is that he was shot in the leg, taking a bullet for his
partner.
his partner.
Yeah.
So in the end, when he's like, "That's the second bullet I've taken for you," there's that extra layer as well, and then that makes sense as to why his partner is so loyal to him.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The whole way through, because you're like, why are you sticking up for this guy? You're putting your career on the line to protect him. But I mean, there's so much to it. Like, not only is he getting these cases closed,
he's closing the right. He's actually like getting the criminals.
Getting the right people.
Yeah.
So it's that question of ethics of, if he's getting the right person, does it matter if he's going about it the wrong way?
Yeah, because there's plenty of, corporate criminals in our world today walking around just like, quote unquote, following the law,
Yeah, exactly.
That we can't get.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's, I think what, the beauty of this film is it raises all of these questions that are not easy to answer.
Yeah. And there's a quote that I pulled from Welles himself that said that he believes films don't work if they're being preachy. You show it as it is to get a response from the audience. Yeah. So at no point in this is he like, this guy is the bad guy. Because you think that's where he's going. You think that's what we're being shown, is that he's just this unreliable. But at the end, you're like, I know he was, but was he as bad? As that they were making out. Do you know what I mean? It's hard to, I don't know, it's hard to differentiate between good and bad by the end of this movie. Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah. And the characters just add all, so many more layers, because it's like, obviously, Quinlan is the guy who, sees someone do wrong and he's like, I'm going to put them away for it, whether I'm using the law or not. Yeah. And Vargas is a guy who's like, no, the law is the most important thing, and we follow the law no matter if it lets criminals loose or not.
Yeah.
And, like, the law protects criminals as much as it protects, citizens.
Yeah.
And then you got the partner Menzies, who is loyal to his partner, and his friend, but then at the end he's like, he knows that his partner has crossed the line and murdered Grandy, Uncle Joe. So he's like, I think that's what lets him know, like, okay, well, my partner's a murderer.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It's an incredible. There's even lines in there that, when you think about it, kind of add to it as well. Because he talks about when he throws the badge away when he's being questioned by Vargas. He's like, we said it at the top of the show that 30 years of dirt and crummy pay. Like, he's not even profiting from it.
Yeah.
He's not like, normally you get dirty cops that are like doing it for the money.
Yeah.
But you get the impression that, like, he's not profiting. It's just like this personal demon he's got around his neck.
Yeah.
That he has to close the case. He has to find the culprit. Whatever
put
cost.
them away no matter what, because he let the guy who killed his wife get away.
Yeah.
It's a deeply layered movie.
Yeah.
And on top of, like, all of these moral and ethical questions that you ask yourself, it's like, it's a ride. You've got like, some intense stuff going on, like the scene with Janet Leigh, the ongoing scene of her in the hotel room, and you don't know if all these guys are going to rape her or not, and then you assume that they do because of the way the scene is set up, and then they kind of hold that moment for a while, like, you don't know, and then you've got Charlton Heston coming back to the hotel trying to find her, and it's all dark, and then you've got the hotel clerk who's
Yeah.
doesn't know what's going on, and yeah, I mean that whole moment was just so intense until you find out, but then you don't really get any sense of relief because she's like trapped in this room,
Yeah.
and Quinlan shows up, and like all this stuff. So it's just and then you've got Charlton Heston busting in the bar and like punching dudes out, which was just such a great like
release.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because it feels like you're just getting tighter and tighter the whole way. So when he goes in and breaks some stuff, you're like, okay, he's taking action finally.
Yeah.
It made me laugh because it made me think of Rear Window, how we've got Charlton Heston, who's got a very attractive new wife and just will do anything to not consummate that marriage. He's like, and I think, someone even says, oh, you're not with your wife on your wedding night or whatever, on your honeymoon. And he's just like, go to the hotel on your own. Okay, I've got to deal with this right now. This cannot wait. And it's like, it can.
Yeah. Yeah, she is beautiful in this movie. I mean, and in Psycho. I mean, this is just 2 years before that. And just like, she's amazing.
Yeah. And she's a strong character as well. Because, I mean, it starts off and she gets taken to see Uncle Joe. And it's not like get me out of here. There's a really good line where she's like, I may be scared of you, but my husband's not. And he's going to come in, he's going to get you. And it's like the way that she says it is still like strong in a way. She's like intimidating them. And then even in the hotel room, she's like, where they're shining a torch in through a window.
Oh,
and she like turns it on and she's like, can you see better now? Like,
She like takes the bulb out and then she throws it. And then Charlton Heston's like, can we turn the lights on? And she's like, no, I threw the bulb.
Yeah, I think that hers is a really interesting character as well. I think that's, it does, she has to be in peril at some point to get Charlton Heston worked up. But
it's definitely not all the way like,
no.
Progressive or whatever, but it's not, she's not a total damsel in distress the whole time. She's got more to do than anybody did in Sin City.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. There's a lot of powerful women in that movie, but
I know what you mean. Yeah. Yeah.
More than Jessica Alba, I guess.
Yeah. And she grew up, she filled out. Yeah. I do. Yeah. Janet Leigh's great. Charlton Heston, I didn't like very much.
Yeah.
I think I don't, like you said, I don't know whether it's the representation and the portrayal, or it's his acting, but he always seemed a bit wooden to me. He didn't quite seem, when he's got a scene against Orson Welles, who, like you said, just disappears into this character completely. Orson Welles Charlton Heston just seems a little classic.
Place or something.
Yeah. But I don't think it takes anything away. I think that maybe it's just because he shares so many scenes with Wells that he's never going to come off better.
Yeah.
He's never going to be the character that you're interested in to go and watch it again.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't like an Oscar-winning performance or anything, but I like him. I like Charlton Heston. I mean, I grew up watching the Ten Commandments and Ben-Hur, and to me, he's just the essence of like classic cinema.
Yeah.
And this is such a good film, like such a good, well-made classic film that if I feel like he just, it just makes sense. Like he just fits. But I would have preferred, a Mexican actor.
Me too. Yeah, I think that's probably the only downside. Is just that lack of representation.
Yeah.
Because we do have other characters that are Mexican. Throughout the film, it's just a shame that they're not portrayed very well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's like all the other Mexican characters are criminals.
Yeah.
a part of this gang, and then even Joe Grundy, he's like, yeah, like not only is he a bad character, like not a bad character, but a bad like an evil character, but he's also just like a fumbling doofus.
Buffoon. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's like following the wrong guy in the car, for like half the film.
And his like toupee falls off and like
yeah.
It's just
I know you said just as we started that it was like 10 years ahead of its time in terms of like the camera work and stuff. And I do want to go back to that because I feel like that the opening shot that we've talked about, the crane shot, is very classical in its composition and the way that it's set up. And then we get the explosion of the car, and all of a sudden we switch to like low shots and like handheld cameras like moving fast and like these grotesque close-ups, and it just like you say, it just progresses. It's like American independent cinema of the 70s.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's exactly kind of what I was thinking, was that the 70s films for me, it's always that moment in time where cinema became what it's currently is and what it's been for the last 50 years, just more like, more experimental angles and, just doing whatever you want with the camera. There's still rules, but like there's kind of not. And the light, I think the lighting is better, in the 70s and stuff. But this is a noir, and the lighting is still amazing.
The shadows.
Yeah, like it just especially with the camera work, like you're saying, it just feels so ahead of its time. I mean, the shots whenever he is strangling Uncle Joe, like the way that is edited and sequenced together, like they just make it look so brutal, without even really showing you anything. There's like a quick second of just like Orson Welles' face like coming right at the camera. And like you said, like even in the beginning, there's just so many like low angles where, Welles's face and body just like fills this whole portion of the screen in a way that you don't really see in older films, especially in the 50s,
I agree. I mean, I think about the scenes, in the lift when they're going, when they're going up, and you feel like so tight in that area. I don't know how they got a camera in there. I mean, it must have been a handheld, I assume, for it to fit in with them all.
Well, they had to build. They might have had like a, you don't see the other side of the elevator, so they might have had to build something. But that's that brings up another point of just like when you're hanging out in the elevator, you're also just hanging out a lot with these characters. Whereas like the way that other films at that time were put together, they're just like pieced together in a nice little, or like these wide shots, almost like sitcoms or whatever. But
it's like,
you would never
why
like
did I do it? I'll tell you why I did it. Here's a 4-minute monologue.
But you never just like hang out with these characters. It almost feels like, a Tarantino film at that point, because it's like you're just hanging out with these characters while they're talking, and they don't realize the other character is like listening, and like they're just like, you're just hanging out.
It's incredibly progressive, and it's just, I mean, I think that it was well received. I know that the studio, like they were happy with the rushes every day, and then when they saw like the a finished cut, they hated it and tried to bury it. Kicked Orson Welles off the lot and wouldn't let him kind of come back, and they kind of re-edited it a little bit. And added some extra scenes and kind of shot around him, and then he wrote them a letter after he had seen it and was like, "Hey, it's not all bad, but please, like," and I think it was like a 40-page memo. And he was like, just, this is what we need to keep. This is like what I was going for. Try and keep this up, blah, 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 blah. Which is a real shame. And you can tell, like I said, I listened to the commentary and they kind of point them out, but there's like 2 or 3 scenes that you could tell had been reshot afterwards. Because it doesn't necessarily have the same style. It's gone back to classical. You know, it's kind of like, it's a medium shot of 2 characters talking to each other. You know, it's not like underneath them as they're kind of getting closer and like whispering in each other's faces. You know, it's like you were saying, it's disposition. It's just them talking about stuff. Yeah. Which does feel odd, but yeah, I mean, it's
crazy that happened. Like this film is so incredibly well crafted. Yeah. That it just it's crazy that the studio would do that. I mean, so when this film was released, I mean, was the version that we watched, I'm guessing, was not the version that was released in 1958.
Yeah, so there was a theatrical version, which I believe is the one that's out there. It's like 100. It's like an hour and 36 minutes, 39 minutes.
Okay.
And then I think there's like a recut version that they put out that's like an hour and 30 minutes maybe. And then in 2008, these 2 film historians kind of took Orson Welles' letter and like rebuilt it. So like edited it, the 2 things together so that it would be kind of how he envisioned the final thing. And that's like an hour and 50 minutes.
Yeah. And that's the version you watched, right? The 1 hour 50?
No, I watched because I had a look on, because I was I didn't want to watch and like talk about things that kind of, I don't know, that wasn't out there. Yeah. So I had a look on Apple TV and I saw that like the one was an hour and 38, so I watched that one.
Oh, okay. I watched one that was an hour and 50.
Dang. Okay, so I need to go and watch that one now.
Yeah, because I'm like trying to think of what like scenes you would be talking about where they're, you know, because nothing really stood out to me. Everything felt right.
So there's 2 scenes in particular. So the first one is when, in that first half an hour, when Vargas goes back to the hotel after Janet Leigh's had her first confrontation with Uncle Joe, and they're in the hotel lobby talking. That is a scene that was shot after Orson Welles was kicked off, because he didn't want them to like really meet again until they left the next morning. He was like, you don't need to know they've had this conversation.
Yeah.
And the second one is after Vargas accuses Quinlan and Quinlan throws his badge, Vargas is coming out and he talks to the other guy and he's like, do I still have any credibility left? Can you show me the other cases? And he's like, yeah, sure, I can show you. And they go down the stairs together.
Okay, that scene was in there.
Yeah, so that scene, so they were the ones that were shot afterwards. And that scene, I think Orson Welles said that it wasn't terrible because the shadows were really good in it. So he's like, yeah, you can keep that, that's fine. But, you know, there's a lot of stuff in there that the studio kind of chopped up.
But the film, I mean, it still did well, right, when it was released?
Yeah, I mean, I think people instantly saw that it was fresh and different and, you know, complex. And yeah, it did really well. It was a shame that the studio just didn't really care about it anymore. They didn't really want to be associated with it. So
yeah, that's so wild.
Yeah. And let me tell you, I mean, since I've watched it, there's a really great like 40-minute interview with Orson Welles on YouTube with Michael Parkinson, who was like an English talk show host from the 70s. And he did a show all the way up until early 2000s, I think. But there's like a great 40-minute interview with him. And they don't necessarily talk a lot about his own movies, but I could listen to him talk all day.
Yeah.
Everything he says is like profound. I don't know how he does it.
He's a cinema god.
It's incredible. And I'm just like, yeah, more Orson all the time.
Yeah, I just like, maybe he's just more of an adult filmmaker because I've never really gotten into him like this before. No. I saw Citizen Kane when I was like, God, I don't know, like 18 or 19. Yeah. And I didn't get it. You know, I was just like, what? Like, this is the greatest film ever made.
Yeah.
You know, but I do remember, you know, I rewatched that 2 or 3 years ago because you and I had talked about that. We talked about doing that film for our first episode of our podcast before we even decided that it was going to be Film Church Radio and all that. And I went back and watched it, and you know, it's still, I don't know if I would say that it's the greatest film ever made, but there's obviously a great filmmaker there making the film. And Orson, the thing that stood out to me the most, I remember when I rewatched it, was his performance. It was like, man, this young guy is just like embodying this character so well.
Yeah.
Even as an old man, you know, and he's just this young dude.
Yeah, I feel like it always comes top of the list when you poll like filmmakers, and I feel part of it is just because he was like a boy, like he was 26 and he wrote, directed, starred in this film. I think the filmmakers themselves, it's like, I wish when I was 26 I was making something this profound, and like ingenious, you know, because I know I watch it and I'm just like, I still don't know how they did shots. I can't work it out.
Yeah.
And this is a film that's nearly 100 years old.
Yeah.
It's mind-blowing. But I think Touch of Evil, I mean, Citizen Kane is really good. But, okay, this is going to sound really bad, but I think I think once you've watched it, you know what it's about.
Yeah.
You know. Whereas Touch of Evil, I don't know. And
there's so many layers that you...
and it's not a bad thing. It's like, I want to go back because I know that there's more to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's incredible.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's really good.
Mm-hmm. I need to go watch the 1 hour 50 cut of it now.
I know.
I felt like I really should have texted you because I was so close to being like, okay, which cut are you watching? But I didn't want to confuse things. So I just went with the one that was streaming.
But you have it on DVD, right? Or you have it on Blu-ray?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Does it is it a Criterion or what do you have?
So it's an English Masters of Cinema. It's pretty similar to Criterion, I guess. Yeah. Not as expansive. The numbers, but yeah, it has all 3 versions on there.
Okay, nice.
So I just, cool. I've got it there waiting, and I need an excuse to go back and watch it within the next few days.
Now you have one.
That's what I'm going to do. Anything else, Brandon, that we want to talk about this film?
Just looking at my notes here, and the second time watching it, the first time watching it, after he strangles Uncle Joe and he leaves the room and the shot just gets close up on the sign that says "Stop, forget anything." Yeah. I didn't get why that was shown the first time, and the second time I was like, oh, he left his cane. Mm-hmm. It's just such a brilliant little piece of filmmaking there. Yeah.
Again, like we said, it's one of those films that I don't feel like anything is consequential. Yeah. Inconsequential, I should say. Anything is everything means something.
Yeah. And just the character that Orson Welles plays, I feel like is just one of the great classic portrayals of all time. He's the kind of guy that I've met before. Yeah. He's just full of BS. And every time you correct him or have something to say, he's just very quickly has an answer. Yeah. And it's a BS answer. He's full of BS, but you can't challenge him because he believes his own BS. Yeah. Those are the hardest people to challenge because they believe their own lies.
Yeah. He's got to be one of my most intriguing characters I've ever seen. Yeah. I'm just mesmerized by him. I'm just like, who is this person? I want to know more, Yep. Yeah. What a film.
Yeah. It was great.
Film. Awesome. Well, now we're going to guess what the other person rated it on Letterboxd, I think we've probably got a good idea. But
I think so.
Yeah, I think that. I mean, I'm just gonna cut the crap. I think you rated it 5 stars.
I think you rated it 5 stars.
You're right. I mean, of course, the first time I didn't. It was the rewatch that tipped it.
Yeah. I think same for me. I mean, it was really good still the first time I watched it, but then watching it the second time, I was like, oh, like, yeah, it was just crazy. Yeah, man. Masterpiece of cinema.
Agreed. No pressure, Brandon. What are we going to be watching next week?
Well, I feel like I might have picked another one because I know you've seen it before, and I know that you've rated it already on your Letterboxd, and God. I know how much you love Billy Wilder.
Oh my God!
But when I was like, going through Letterboxd, like looking at film noirs, I was like, I haven't seen most of these older films. Like, I've seen a lot of older films, but not as much as you by any means. I'm like clicking on all these films. I'm like, Lewis has seen that. Lewis has seen that. Lewis has seen that. Like all the top film noirs of all time. So it was going to be hard to find something you hadn't watched. So I didn't even try. I picked Sunset Boulevard from 1950.
Yes.
Which I've never seen. So, and it looks good. Like the poster looks cool. It's got some celluloid on the front, and it says Sunset Boulevard, a Hollywood story. Love a good Hollywood story. And Billy Wilder is an incredible filmmaker who I would like to see more of his films. I mean, we did an episode on The Apartment, and that film was so good. I loved watching that for the first time with you, and so I thought this might be good. Good to wrap up Noirvember.
Man, I am so excited to talk about this film. It is a masterpiece. But more on that next week. We're going to talk about it in depth next week. Right. So join us then to hear our thoughts on Sunset Boulevard. That brings us to the end of the show. You can find the show on Twitter and Instagram at Film Church Radio. And you can follow us individually on Letterboxd. Brandon is at Salmonscope, and I am at WalkerLewis3007. Keep up with what we've been watching in real time. How many times will I log this film in the next week? You'll be able to find out if you go and follow me. We also have all our back episodes streaming on all good podcast platforms. Please leave us a rating and review so we know if you liked the film, if you didn't, and what we picked for us to watch in the future. We are probably going to get to the point soon where we're going to need some recommendations. Ren and I are going for our watch list at pretty rapid fire. So if you have anything that you want us to watch, get in touch, let us know, and hopefully we'll pick it in the future. But all that's left to say, Brandon, is... Come on, read my fortune.
You haven't got any.
What do you mean?
Your future is all used up.
Well, on that note, I guess I better say my prayers. Amen.
Amen.
Very softly done. See you next week, everyone. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.